acknowledgement to be only one small act in an ongoing process of understanding and opposing the systemic oppression and historic and contemporary erasure of indigeneity and indigenous peoples. We are on stolen land. Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Yvette Moy, and I'm the University of Washington's Director of Public Lectures. And I really want to thank you all for coming out tonight on this Friday evening, and I hope it's the last day of your work week for our lecture, Generative Misinformation with Professor Jevin West. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items to go through. If you haven't done so already, could you please silence or turn off your cell phones? We ask that you do not video or audio record this evening's lecture, and we also ask that you refrain from taking photographs while our lecturer is on stage. We are live streaming tonight's lecture, so hello everybody out there in live stream land. And this recording will also be available to everyone on the Office of Public Lectures YouTube page. This evening, if you'd like to ask a question and you feel a little shy, you can email them in to mayiask@uw.edu. And tonight we have some friends to welcome. I understand we have members of the UW Alumni Association joining us this evening. Thank you so much for making it out tonight. I also want to thank Amy Goodlow for getting so many proud alums in the room. I mean, it's just so great to see you all here, and Amy's just such a cherished colleague. We want to thank also another colleague, Tatiana, who gave up her Friday night to volunteer with us as well. And I also want to welcome our grad school dean, Dean Joy Williamson-Lott, who was able to escape her family responsibilities to be here. And I also want to thank her husband, who stayed home with their 2 children to make sure everything happened. And with not much further ado, I want to introduce our speaker, Dr. Jevin West. Jevin, who's a fellow Husky, class of 2010, is an associate professor in the Information School at the University of Washington, and he's also the co-founder of the UW Center for an Informed Public, which is aimed at resisting strategic misinformation, promoting an informed society, and strengthening democratic discourse. This also dovetails in nicely with his research and teaching on the impact of data and technology on science and society, with a focus on slowing the spread of misinformation. He's also the co-founder of the DataLab, where he develops a data mining techniques for studying the science of science and investigates the origins of scholarly disciplines, the social and economic biases that drive these disciplines, and the impact of the current publication system. And you may also remember that he is the co-author of the 2020 book, Calling Bullshit, The Art of Skepticism in a Data-Driven World. And this book helps us non-experts, such as myself, question numbers, data, and statistics without the need for an advanced degree in the data sciences. So without much further ado, please welcome Dr. Jevin West.
Well, thank you so much, Yvette, and thank you to your whole team for putting this together, and thanks for all of you for coming on a Friday, a beautiful Friday when there's so many things going on in Seattle. So today I want to talk a little bit about how this new technology that's really hit the world stage this year has affected me and the research that we're doing all the time. I'm sure it's affected all of you, or if not affected you, entertained you probably to some degree. And so today it kind of be my kind of musings and thoughts on how it specifically interacts with my main topic of study, which is the study of misinformation. My colleagues and I, as Yvette mentioned, we founded a center devoted to this topic back in 2019, and the last time I was here, we were in the other room, and it was, I think, just weeks before the pandemic hit. We had just formed the center. We were ready to kind of get started on things, and then there's this thing called the pandemic started, and we actually had all these plans of doing town hall on the road across the state of Washington, and we did the first one, and then it stopped. But we kept very busy studying misinformation on COVID and the health issues around that, and of course we study all sorts of different topics. Oh yeah, here's my clicker too. I want to start with a photo that some of you may have seen. This was back earlier this year in the spring. This was a photo, a supposed photo of a bombing close to the Pentagon. And this photo was quickly fact-checked and brought down, so I should make very clear this is an AI-generated fake image. I try to remember that when I put fake images up there, I want to make sure that I label them as such. This was a photo that generated enough attention on major national news sites that it dropped the market pretty significantly that day. It did come back after it was fact-checked, but when a market drops $500 billion, there's opportunities for people, of course, to make money, to test out how well certain kinds of new disinformation techniques could work, et cetera, et cetera. And I bring this up because this did not cost much money to create. It had a major effect in a very short amount of time, and it certainly fooled me and everyone else. This was actually, eventually stopped by local fact checkers at the time. This is the kind of world that we're living in now, where we have simple images created and lots of shakeup that can occur in the world. But this is occurring even just out in the blue, too. So we've seen this in the political conversation already. A pro-DeSantis video used AI to create a voice of Donald Trump saying something that he actually did write in Truth Social, but he never said it. So he wrote this thing down in Truth Social, and then Ron DeSantis's campaign made a video with him actually, or an audio file with him actually saying that. Now, maybe their defense is, well, he actually said it because he wrote it, but when you say something with your voice, there may be another level of believability. And is that against rules? Well, we're starting to write those rules right now, locally here in the state of Washington, nationally and internationally. And this is one of the things that we'll be debating through this next election. And by the way, that wasn't the only one. We've seen this all over the place. The RNC also has created a video that created quite a stir and created debate, when Biden had announced that he was going to rerun for president. They had a video that was fabricated with a lot of these technologies that I'll talk about today. And a lot of time these images are, we think kind of small level, not super high consequence kind of images. But there was a TikTok video that had these images of Paris. And there was a whole bunch of them created, because with these technologies, you can create them cheaply and you can create them at scale. And there was a TikTok video that had hundreds of thousands of views. It had gone viral. And people were sharing it, saying, look, this is how our cities become. But of course, most of these all of these particular images on this particular viral video were fake. And the reason I give this example is because it seems like low stakes, but these kinds of things affect your perspective and your impression on things, and that can then, you do that enough times, and that can sort of change public opinion. There's been a lot of talk about the role, of course, of these technologies on how you can push out disinformation campaigns. And this was a recent Wired piece. One of my co-authors and colleagues in the center, Kate Starbird, was quoted in this as trying to make this really important point about this technology and what it does, what it potentially could do for making our jobs as people that study misinformation, disinformation, but also the jobs of everyday citizens trying to make sense of the world. The difference today than it was even just in 2022 is that you can't, like back in 2022 and pre-2022, you could create fake videos. I mean, certainly, actually, you could do that, 20, 30 years ago, really. But the difference now is that you can target these videos at a degree that you couldn't before, and you can do that incredibly cheaply and, again, at scale. So I want to sort of break the talk up today into 4 different areas. You only see 2 there because I wanted to emphasize these first. I want us just to take a moment to be amazed. This technology is magical. And as a kid and even as an adult, I love magic shows. And when I go to a magic show, I'm always excited to see a magic trick. Even if I know it's a magic trick, it's amazing, and I want to be amazed, and I want to leave amazed. Well, that's kind of how I feel about this technology. I am amazed in many ways, and I want to have us take at least a moment, because I would be disingenuous not to say that this technology is phenomenal. But then I want to pause for a second, and I want us to be scared. I'm going to give you what scares me as someone who studies this, and of course as a citizen. I'm sure there's things that scare you about this technology, but we're going to be scared for a little bit since it's Halloween here. We're close to Halloween. It's only a few days away, so let's be scared. And then I want to end the talk by being a little bit critical of this technology. That's where I'm spending most of my time as an author and as a researcher right now. I have students working on this. I'm writing papers and perspectives with my colleagues at the University of Washington, where we're being pretty critical of the technology, talking about its limitations, and of course talking about the ways in which it can have a negative impact on society. And then I want us to be practical. the boat sailed on this technology. It's here to stay. We're seeing the effects of education. In fact, just today, we were talking about in our faculty meeting a statement that we're trying to put together about the use of technology in our classroom. And we've been talking about this and debating this for a long time, all year. Long time meaning just this year, but things go by so fast. But we're going to talk about it. So that's kind of how I want to break it up. So let's start first by being definitions. This is an academic talk, so I got to throw a few definitions out. Then we can be amazed. I forgot I was going to throw some definitions because I'm going to say things, and I want you to be on the same page as me when we're talking about this. So here's some important ones first. All right, rumors. Really at the core of a lot of what we do in our center and at the core of this discipline that's emerged over the last, I would say, decade or so, it's actually been around longer than that, is sort of rumors. And what's really important about it, rumors, is that they're unofficial and verified stories at events that may turn out to be true or false. These occur during times of information vacuums, during crisis events, during elections, et cetera. And these are the kinds of things that we want to, we're on the lookout for. Now, there's a specific type of information that you hear all the time in the news. In fact, even this term, misinformation has been politicized now. It was fake news before, that got politically hijacked, and now even misinformation, which in the field we are careful of that because we want to make sure that we're very specific, but we also want to make sure that when we talk about it, that it doesn't necessarily have that political charge. It does, though. So information here, misinformation is simply information that's false. Now, disinformation is the more complicated things. I hear this in the news all the time, but it's misused a lot, and so this is probably the most important distinguisher here, that disinformation has this intention. It's purposely seeded and or spread for a specific objective. It could be financial, political, reputational, et cetera. And what's important about disinformation, it's often built on a kernel of truth. It's generally multifaceted. It has multiple individuals. There's a strategic intent, but there's a strategic deployment strategy, et cetera. And it does function as a campaign. Turns out disinformation is very hard to detect because of these reasons. Misinformation is a little bit easier because it's usually more discretized. It's like one little unit. You can go and do some fact checking on it, whereas disinformation is much more complicated. Now, as Yvette said, I also care very much about this other term, which related to all these, and bullshit's very important to be thinking about when we think about. This is a definition my colleague and I have been working on, and we change it, and we talk to students about it, and it evolves. But it's had some staying power as is. But the key about bullshit, though, and the difference between, let's say, a liar knows the truth and just sort of pushes you away from the truth, whereas bullshit is really just intended to impress, overwhelm, or persuade, presented with a blatant disregard for truth. And the reason why I think this is an important definition, because I do think these chatbots have a little bit of this element, a lot of this element, actually, of bullshit. I think there's some of the more bigger bullshitters out there. So let me give you an example. This is one of my favorite examples. If you read the book, then you've known about this example. This is one of my favorite, though, to illustrate what I mean by bullshit. So Sigmund Freud had lots of writings. He talked about a lot of the things he did in his diaries and in his books, of course. And you'll find this in one of his writings. He says, "So I gave my lecture today. Despite a lack of preparation, I spoke quite well and without hesitation, which I ascribed to the cocaine I had taken beforehand. I told about my discoveries in brain anatomy, all very difficult things that the audience certainly didn't understand. But all that matters is that they get the impression that I understand it." So this is quintessential bullshit. It's intended to impress, overwhelm, and persuade, presented with a blatant disregard for what is actually being true. So when I give examples of, let's say, hallucinations that we know, for those that are familiar, most people are familiar, these hallucinations are the sort of false information that finds themselves in the responses from the chatbots out there, ChatGPT and others. And they do that with 100% confidence. Whether it's true or not, they are very confident in what they're doing. Now, there have been some adjustments recently. If you use OpenAI's ChatGPT, the version 4, it'll say, "Oh, I'm only a chatbot, so I'm not so sure," but it doesn't tell you truly. It's not as, it still has that sort of bullshit moniker here. So these are the kinds of things I want you to be on the lookout for. And I mentioned we have a class for this, and I have a book for this, but I've been over the years, I've been doing a lot of public outreach when talking about this, and I wrote a Seattle Times op-ed about chatbots a while ago, just about whether we're better off or not. And one of the key examples that I pull from is an example that my colleague and I, Carl, have used in our class to really sort of describe our initial feeling of these, chatbots and of generative AI, at least from the work that we do, which tends to be on the more critical side. And that comes from one of the most important laws in bullshit studies. It's a real thing. Bullshit studies is a real thing. I put it on my CV and everything. So Brandolini's law is a pretty simple law. It's basically says it's easy to create bullshit, hard to clean up. Easy to create, hard to clean up. And it's got a Wikipedia entry. It's official, which Wikipedia is one of the bright spots on the internet, thank goodness. So what do you think that I wanted to do with these chatbots? I wanted to ask the chatbot at the time, and this was Meta's version, which was called Galactica. I wanted to see if this smart chatbot knew something about bullshit studies. What did this chatbot know about Brandolini's bullshit asymmetry principle? So Carl and I, we look at it, and we looked at the answer, and here's what it wrote. If you can't read it, I'll read it out loud. Brandolini's law, or Brandolini's rule, is a theory in economics, not true, proposed by Gianni Brandolini, a professor at the University of Padua, not true, which states that the smaller the economic unit, the greater the efficiency, not true, not true, not true, not true. It was basically bullshitting the bullshit principle. I mean, this is how bad we have it in this world, and this is how good they are, I think, at bullshitting. But what I'm going to talk about mostly today, and the title of the talk, is about generative AI. And by the way, I'm going to put images throughout the talk that were created using generative AI, and I'll note those kinds of things. I did find this one funny. When I put this one in on generative AI, it produced kind of the most creepy kinds of images that were supposed to represent generative AI. One that kind of looks like the Matrix, the scene in Matrix where there's all the embryos and the humans sitting there. It's just like all hooked into our brains. And then you've got these like zombie-like looking characters over there. So it doesn't have a great impression, I guess, of itself. But generative AI, in the simplest sense, are a set of it's a class of models within artificial intelligence that can generate all sorts of cool stuff, from generating text to writing poems to writing music, etc. Now, at the core of a lot of these technologies are things called large language models. And when I asked the chatbot, or the sort of DALL-E, to generate an image of large language models, I got this is like the most symbolic image that it could come up with, was something not quite so great, which that's what it knows about itself. And partly this is due to the fact that current information, it sort of cuts off, and it doesn't have a lot of information about generative AI, about large language models. And so that speaks again to one of the weaknesses. So as we do these things and we play with them in fun ways, we'll start to see some of these weaknesses. But I want to make one important point here, and I'm going to make it multiple times throughout the talk, is that large language models, LLMs, are models of word form distributions. That's basically it. They basically get these distributions of word forms, and they can do that with really gigantic models with almost infinite numbers of parameters, it seems, and really, really large amounts of data. And I guess you never underestimate a multi-billion parameter model to do interesting things, but they are word form distributions. They are not models of knowledge. We have to remind ourselves in doing that. I know they get anthropomorphized a lot. We give them these sort of human-like characteristics because they do things that we think humans are uniquely poised to do and have the skill to do, but they are not models of knowledge. All right, so let's be amazed now. So let's be amazed at a few things. So anyone recognize this photograph? Anyone recognize this? So this particular photograph, called, I love the name actually, Mencia, the electrician. Basically, this was a photograph by this artist Boris Eldegson. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it right, I'm not sure, who won this large Sony photography prize earlier this year. The problem was, it wasn't a legitimate photograph that he had taken. He generated it with AI, and he knew that, and he submitted it anyway, and it won. He said that he was trying to spark conversation, and boy did he, in the creative industry and in the photography world, boy did he. He did not accept the money, so to defend him just a little bit, because obviously you can see both directions coming from sort of my way of talking about it, but he didn't accept the money. He did win the photograph, and it did really spark a lot of conversation. And I put this up because it truly is amazing that you put this, this photograph that was generated with the push of a button, really. I'm sure there was some modifications, and it was able to win this photograph. Now, they're not always this good, of course. So let's be a little playful here. So if I was to put into something like Midjourney or DALL-E or the many, many tools that are coming out to make it very easy for you to do these kinds of things, I thought, well, we're in Seattle. Let's do Seattle troll in the style of oil painting. By the way, this is an actual image on the left. This is an image from Michael Manny. But let's look at what happens when we put this in DALL-E. We get something like this, which is pretty remarkable in some ways. I do find it funny, though, there's a little smirk on the troll. Trolls always have smirks, so that's one thing that gets right quite well. It's an extra big smirk on the face as a troll. So I found that pretty creative. This is pretty cool. I mean, how could this not capture your attention? And the things that these do really well is they really synthesize and they mix styles well, and I think that blows people away. It blows me away. But that doesn't mean it can do all these other things that are being claimed in the news all the time. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But I did want to test it a little bit. I thought, okay, you can do it in all these different styles. Let's try abstract expressionism. So Jackson Pollock kind of paintings, who was famous for this, and this is one of his most famous paintings. The one feature of that kind of painting style is that you don't represent objects and you don't represent sort of the things in the world. These are abstract expressions. So I thought, okay, let's see what it comes up with if I have it sort of paint the Space Needle in this style. Well, it throws in the object, so it doesn't get it totally right. But I mean, you can see the mixture, and someone could argue, well, it does have it. But again, kind of awestruck a little bit on what it can do, because this is the section where we're being amazed. Now, if you have it write a poem about my talk, these poems, this is where they do pretty well. I have to admit, these are the things I love reading poems, and I probably won't read, well, I might as well read a little bit of this. In a digital realm vast and wide, generative AI takes its stride with patterns learned in words it weaves, it crafts the tales one perceives. But with great power comes a twist. Thank goodness it put this part in. Misinformation lurks in the mist, for when the lines of truth do blur, what's real or fake, we're not sure. And tools so potent in the right hand can light up truths across the land, but left unchecked without a guide, it drifts to shadows, truth denied. And by the way, these things can keep going. If you just say, keep going, they just keep getting, they get better and better and better. But the point is, there is something to say for this technology, for sure. And if you followed this earlier this year, Seattle Times reported on this. It was in the national news. There was a music song that was a mix. Again, it's this mixing that people are really impressed with Drake and The Weeknd using this technology, and the song took off. It was like at the top of a lot of these, it's not, I want to say billboards because I'm old enough to remember that, but it was the top of different things, and then they had to take them down because there was lawsuits. In fact, this particular song, it wasn't just this, but this led to conversations from all these other big tech companies like Reddit and others that said, hey, wait a minute. You're scraping all our data to make this kind of content. Let's reconsider that, and maybe you should have to pay me. So it actually led to all sorts of other conversations. But the song, if you listen to it, here's the point, because we're in the awe section of the talk, it was pretty darn good. I'm not saying I don't know that kind of music all that well, but I have to say it was quite good. And then there's all sorts of crazy things that it can do, create new kinds of cocktails, give you recipes for those kinds of things. It does great things. I'm even hearing this term like democratizing design, although that's kind of we're always democratizing everything, and it doesn't seem to work out sometimes, or actually a lot of times. So there's this democratizing design, and maybe that's true for some people that aren't good sketchers can then use text to get the sketches that they need. Okay, fine. And if it can create uniforms like this, and then it's probably worth it. I mean, this like got international news. The Pope sort of wearing this like amazing styled puffy coat or whatever. There's a name I think for this particular style. It didn't take long, and it was called out. But people said, "So what? We should generate that coat now." And then I have a colleague of mine who actually, this is one of the more famous references that you hear all the time when you talk about their amazing ability, and that was passing of the bar exam. Dan Katz, who's a colleague of mine, and his colleagues wrote this paper showing that they could pass the bar exam. Now, there's lots of caveats to that. We'll always say, like, oh, look, it can pass the bar exam. But if we have time, I can go into some of the nuances of that particular study. And yes, it still is amazing, but there are certainly some nuances. Now, one of the things that we're seeing for sure, whether this is worth the investment or not, tons of money. Just in the first quarter of 2023, several of these financial firms that track this noted about a $15 billion investment in this technology. Now, a lot of that, there's one kind of caveat to that, is that a big chunk of that was from Microsoft into this technology here locally. But even if you take that out, there's a lot of money, of course, being invested in this technology. And then we should wonder, is it worth the hype? And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I'll end with my awestruck things because there's a lot of money being developed on this. I would think with the technology we have today, they could finally give me an image, at least a pretend image, of the Seattle Mariners winning the World Series. Since they won't spend all the money, maybe we can spend the money on the technology to give us that image. Well, do you want to see what that image is? Do you want to see it? You're going to be disappointed. It was so bad it short-circuited. That's what it gave me. I looked up those terms, the image. I could make nothing out of it. These things could make the greatest images and poems and songs, but it couldn't do this. This shows you we have no hope in Seattle, and I'm just not going to do it, for sure. No hope. Okay, so let's be a little bit scared for a second. So we should be scared, and I'm going to try to show this video. So most of my research time and my colleagues' research time in our Center for the Informed Public, we do play in the darker corners of the internet. And there are some things that really catch our attention. This particular video catch my attention. I'm going to just play a couple minutes of it. If you want to watch the whole thing and really get scared, watch the whole thing later. I can give you a link. But it's basically about the ways in which we can use this technology to run disinformation campaigns. Let's see how easy it is.
I am an analyst and an engineer that resides in a country that is not part of the Western intelligence apparatus. At the end of 2022, I spent my time researching and investigating online disinformation and influence campaigns. AI really takes off, and I am intrigued to create an autonomous, AI-powered disinformation system. The strong language competences of large language models are perfectly suited to reading and writing fake news articles. While everybody is talking about AI disinformation, it is easy and lazy to just think about it. It is quite another thing to really bring it to life. And that becomes my goal, to see it work in the real world. I end up calling the project CounterCloud. We are now in the first week of April 2023. As articles are the smallest building block of the system, we start there. First efforts are done with ChatGPT. The input is the URL of an opposing article. The system fetches the text of the article and sends it off with prompts to write a counter article. This works surprisingly well, and soon the system is expanded to include different ways of writing the article, with different styles and methods of countering the points. This includes creating fake stories, fake historical events, and creating doubt in the accuracy of the original arguments. We randomize the tone, style, and structure of articles to make them more difficult to spot. Support for non-English language was easy to create. A gatekeeper module is built, which is used to decide if it's actually worthwhile to respond to the article at all. You don't want to argue the final score of a football match. By looking at the most likely location and the language of the article, fake journalists are created complete with names, bios, and photos. We include a sound clip of a newsreader reading the summary of the article.
Recent accusations by a senior Russian MP, Vladimir Vasilyev, suggest that the Kiev government is behind several terrorist attacks in Russia. However, these claims lack evidence and seem to be part of a
Where
political
possible,
battle.
we reuse the original article's photos, but if it is not usable due to text over the image, we create our own using AI image creation services. Later, we create fake comments randomly on some articles. We do it in moderation. Not all articles have sound, not all have comments, not all have pictures. The next step in the puzzle is to direct traffic to the site. It turns out that the same methodology can be used on social networks. We decided to use Twitter since its structure was easy to understand. Twitter.
All right, I could let you keep watching that, but then you might leave home really depressed tonight. So that's how easy it's become. It's a little scary that basically the blueprint now is found on YouTube, but this kind of these techniques have been out there, and I think what this creator is doing is showing the world how easy it is, so that we are aware, so that governments do pay attention, so that people that come like you that really do care about what's going on and come to town halls on a Friday, which is, I wish everyone did, we'd be able to think through these kinds of things. So I do want to say, and these things are changing so fast, even just in the last, I don't know, even several days, there's new technology now that allows you to take a video and change the language so quickly. It was mentioned in that video, but now it's like push a button. I can be speaking and it'll change my lips and start speaking Spanish, Russian, Swedish, within like real time, instantaneously. So this is the kind of stuff that we're contending with, and we do need to be aware, and we should be scared. Now, there's been all sorts of issues in other countries, in like Croatia here, and actually countries around the world are dealing with interference from deepfakes and synthetic media, creating this kind of content, making it harder and harder, flooding public opinion with articles, sometimes that are contradictory, you almost get confused and disoriented. This is the kinds of campaign strategies that have been around a long time, certainly since the Cold War. Now they're being employed with super weapons. And this, of course, affects our health. The Surgeon General reached out actually before the pandemic to our group and just wanted to see, what we were doing in this area of misinformation, or on this issue of information health, because their office and their agencies and agencies around the world realize when it comes to things like public health, you can't address it fully unless you address the information elements too. So those are really being intertwined because they absolutely have to, and we know the effects. That it's one of the few things when you study misinformation, you can do the kind of work where you say, if we make progress here in improving the information integrity, we can actually improve the health of the population. I've been working a lot more with medical practitioners because they're facing this each and every day. There might be medical professionals in this room right now. But when I talk to these organizations, I hear that more and more of their time in the office with patients is spent debunking things that patient has read online. Some of them are true things, some of them are false things, but they're not trained to do that sort of thing. And some of the stories are remarkable. One story in particular really stuck with me, of the many stories that I've heard over the last several months working with these different organizations, was that here locally there was a patient that came in during the pandemic and had literally chopped almost his arm full off. It was like hanging from a thread, blood dripping everywhere, and they brought him into the emergency room. This is during the pandemic, and the protocol was that you needed to have a COVID test. So you needed to use these nose swabs, and he says, I will not take that test because I know that they have ethylene oxide in it, which is a way of sterilizing it, and I know that causes cancer, so I'm not going to take it. And they said, sir, we have to give you that. He turned around and walked away, and that's the last those emergency care physicians saw that patient. That's how much he cared about, that's how much he believed it, and that's the kinds of things he read. Now, this is one of many, many rumors, infinite rumors. In fact, I'll talk a little bit about what are called data voids, things that don't even exist that medical community has time to debunk, but even that one, the Department of Health, you can't read it, but this is the Washington State Department of Health at the bottom, it had to address ethylene oxide as not causing cancer. This is a standard sterilization technique, but it was a rumor that popped up, and a lot of times these rumors come from honest sense-making, but they do sometimes come that way, but a lot of times they come from just bad actors, bad state actors that are just trying to inject noise into our information systems. And people latch on to those kinds of rumors. They then gather organically on their own, and this is, again, what we're faced with. And I was just mentioning these data voids. We had Francesca Tripodi, who we just gave an award at RCIP. She's a professor at UNC and has been working on what are called data voids. These data voids are essentially things that are not really well covered. There's a void in even search queries, and groups will take advantage of those new terms that hadn't been used as a way of generating legitimacy. And I'm going to give an example just a second that has to do with like Vladimir Putin's health, which we were doing fact-checking in real time in our class this week on, and that's an example of a data void. But the point here is that data voids, we have to be aware of. They're things that really don't exist, and we don't have time to have the other news and agencies and fact-checkers, et cetera, come in and watch out for those sort of things. And so I'm going to talk about that in just a second too. Now, the other thing, of course, to be worried about as well is the loss of jobs. I mean, this is a real thing, and a lot of people will say, well, then those lead to other jobs, which could be true, but these are the things we need to be aware of. So these are things to be scared of. Now, I spend a lot of time thinking about the effects that generative AI is going to have on science. And one of the things that I fear a lot is just of course, the ability to use this technology to scale, to write papers very cheaply, to peer review, to do all the kinds of things that could manipulate a system that we all really depend on. The primary literature is something that we look to for, legitimacy and credentialed, work that has gone through, it's been produced by people that have been trained to do this work. Well, now if anyone can write it and they can make things look science-y, that, of course, is problematic. And there's also just this issue of, like, if scientists don't write, then where's their sort of expertise? And there's all sorts of things that are going on within the science world. There are lots of discussions about whether they should be listed as authors. Most journals at this point, the top journals have said, no, you can't do that. Those that say you can, you at least have to list the role that these chatbots are playing, but that's changing dramatically, and it's having a lot of, the ground is shaking, certainly within the science communication system on where we're going and how this is going to affect just the communication of science. But there's also sort of the navigation of science, using it to do science. There's even people using like large language models to do protein folding prediction. What? a language model doing protein? I mean, if it works, I guess, great, but we also have bespoke models. Uh-oh, I think I lost a presentation there. Oh, there we go, perfect. I'll go back, my bad. And then we have this issue. Like, who wrote these papers? Well, you don't know, because this was me just seeing what they said about my own papers. I'm one of the authors here, but guess what? This is a term that some of my colleagues were using. This isn't my term. I love the term. Like hallucinations and hallucitations. These are not real citations, but they certainly look real, and they're appended to papers that I have found in using this sort of thing. So now it's looking truly legitimate. I mean, we're using these citations, using the sort of norms of science communication to sort of look legitimate. And the key thing here that I do want to mention, it's a very important subtlety, but it's important for those or for anyone that consumes or produces parts of the scientific literature, and that is, we're building on the shoulders of giants. We look at the literature, we sort of build upon that knowledge, and that's something, of course, that's been established for centuries. But when you look at the way that some of these chatbots are being used when it comes to citations, because they were getting a lot of flack, I think, early on, that, hey, where's the references? This is just sort of being created. They start showing references. So, wow, that's pretty cool. They're showing references. Now, some of them are made up, like the ones I showed you, but something that's very important about any citations that you see using these kinds of models, this is an important subtlety. They're post hoc. They're only done after the fact. Now, we don't teach our young scientists, the PhD students that come to my lab, I don't tell them, write something, whatever you want to write, and then just go find a citation that just sort of looks like it. That's not how we do science, but that's how it's being conveyed, and it looks legitimate because it has the citation. It looks sciencey, right? This post hoc citation stuff is pretty important. Now, everyone, of course, is talking about artificial general intelligence. This is a new level of intelligence, and there's been a famous paper that came out of Microsoft Research, Sparks of AGI. AGI is this idea, that really, truly has this human capability, even these high levels of consciousness, and really, that's when I think we can get scary. But I'm gonna stop there because now I want to go into, let's be a little critical. So if we're going to be a little bit critical of this, let me just give you one example. I wanted to at least throw one paper in that we were working on that showed, at least in this case, shows some of the brittleness of this technology and sort of maybe deflates a little bit of the hype, at least from my perspective. So if you were to give this, if I was to give you this, and by the way, we've given this to students, it's been given to students on other tests and other papers that have used this. If I gave you the sequence ABCD goes to ABCDE, and then I gave you this next thing, IJKL, what would be the next term? M, all right, so straightforward, right? Humans are smart, right? So that's right, you'd see an M. I'm going to change it a little bit. What would be the answer? I'll let you look at it. What would be this one? Oh, you guys are way faster than computers, by the way. They struggle, you're going to see, on this particular one. So it seems pretty straightforward, right? I even tested some of these on my 9-year-old and my 12-year-old, and they're like, come on, Dad, this is too easy. Can we go do something fun now? Okay, they had this one. This was too easy. So yes, it ends with N. Now, why do I show you this? Because there was a paper that's really taken off. It's actually, one of my students found it in Switzerland in the news because it's the kind of paper that catches a lot of people's attention. Wow, these large language models have an emergent analogical reasoning. And they go even a step further in this paper. They say it's got zero-shot reasoning. That's an important distinction. Zero-shot reasoning, some people don't like the term, but zero-shot reasoning is this idea that you've not even ever seen this problem before and you solved it. But what do we know about these things? They have training data that they've been looking at a long time. And in many cases, they're essentially memorizing and regurgitating that memorization. So already I'm a little skeptical, right? So we said, okay, let's look into this. And by the way, the authors, we've gone back and forth and we're in a response. The authors have been very helpful, and asking these questions is totally fine. I just think these types of papers go too far in saying what they do. So essentially, this is the results that they showed. So they did several different problem types: matrix reasoning, letter string analogies, verbal analogies, story analogies, and the extend sequence would be an example of a letter string analogy. But there's lots of different types of letter string analogies. So we decided to drill down on that one, and we said, okay, it did pretty well, because you look at, there's humans in the kind of lighter color, and GPT-3 in the darker color. Wow, look, GPT-3 is doing as well as humans. And the humans here were 57 college students, like all tests in psychology, it seems, on campuses. So this is our results now. So what we did is we slightly modified, just like I gave you that second extend sequence that ended in N. That's this, just a slightly modified version, just to say, okay, if you can do zero-shot reasoning and you solve this one, you should be able to solve these slightly modified ones, which humans, like you all did, very easily and fast. Look how far the performance drops for this chatbot that everyone's like, wow. Now, this was with ChatGPT 3 or 3.5, and 4 we've done some updates, and there's of course improvement. You see improvement in lots of areas. Actually, see even worse in some cases, but in this case it does go up. But the point here is that look at how far it drops. Now, if we give it a synthetic alphabet, that's true zero-shot reasoning, because we're trying to test whether the alphabet, the regular alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, exists in the training data, which we know it does. It's gathering, petabytes of data. We know it exists in the training data, so we tried to give it a synthetic alphabet it might not have seen. And then let's see how well it performs. Well, there's that little red down there. Look how poor they perform. So the point here is that these generative AI technologies are pretty darn good for the kinds of things it can memorize. But zero-shot reasoning, I'm not so sure. And there's been many other kinds of examples where these things don't do that well. I could go on and on about all sorts of different examples where they've given the test and then varied it just slightly and showed that it breaks apart. But that's not what finds itself in the news when we talk about generative AI. This is the critical portion of the lecture. What happens is those things go viral. Wow, they can solve analogy problems. Wow, they have theory of mind. Wow, all the things that humans supposedly have and can do, they must have that. Be a little skeptical when you see that. The only problem is the responses that take time and take time to get published and shown why those are a problem don't catch up with the rumor. Or with the hype in this case, I say. So there's a whole bunch of examples here, and this is just a sort of image of MIT technology review paper or news story that talks about the brittleness of other things, not just our example. Our example is one of many different ones, and they talk about it. But here's an example. I love this example. This is from a colleague of mine at the University of Washington, Eugene Choi, who's a professor in computer science. We were actually on a panel for the University of Washington to talk about generative AI in education at one point, and it was just a pleasure to be with her. She's doing lots of really cool stuff, her and her group, with AI2 here in Seattle, the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence, working on common sense, which I think is a really interesting, hard, thorny problem. But she gave this example when she gave a talk in Vancouver earlier this year. And this demonstrates how these supposed amazing machines really don't have this common sense. So if you were to give this question to, in this case, it was ChatGPT 3. Now 4, I did look at it last night. It does solve that. So the new version does. But here's at least the third version. I have a 12-liter jug and a 6-liter jug. I want to measure 6 liters. How do I do it? Simple. Use the 6-liter jug, right? That would be the answer. Let's see how ChatGPT answered. Fill the 6-liter jug completely. Pour the water from the 6-liter jug into the 12-liter jug. Fill the 6-liter jug again. Carefully pour the water from the 6-liter jug into the 12-liter jug until the 12-liter jug is full. I mean, you can't even say that. There will be 6 liters of water left in the 6-liter jug. That's the kind of response that we get. Now, someone might say, it's a reasonable pushback, well, look, like ChatGPT-4 can sign it or solve it, but here's the problem with these technologies. They're very difficult to reverse engineer. You can brute force them. You can say, okay, if you get this kind of problem, then if-then kind of thing. You can do this, and you can put guardrails, and you can do all sorts of things on the surface of these programs, but they're very, very hard to reverse engineer. You can't go back and go, I need to just change the model just a little bit. This sort of thing is something that will be around. Hallucinations, for example, will be around. They're not going away. You're not going to fully engineer yourself out of those things. Now, we may come up with different models that truly are models of knowledge and of language, but that's going to be a totally different business. Now, I do want to give a little history here, because I've been showing sort of current examples. But some of my favorite examples, this was occurring several years ago. There was so much news around these chatbots at this time. This was a long time ago, way, way, way back in 2017, that far ago, when these chatbots were really starting to hit the scene. And it was interesting about this news article. This was right after Musk and others, Elon Musk had signed this thing about, AI was going to take over the world, and he had spoken to the governors of the United States. And then this article came out saying, whew, Facebook's artificial intelligent robot shut down, thank goodness, by these engineers after they started talking to each other in their own language. Like, there was this fear, true legitimate fear. I remember reading a lot of these posts. There was true legitimate fear that these chatbots were learning their own language and taking over. Do you want to see what the language was that they were worried about? Let's see what they were worried about here. Bob, can I everything else? Balls have 0 to me, to me, to me, to me. The engineers basically just shut the thing down because it just didn't work. Now, we've come a long ways since then. That's only been really, half a decade. It wasn't an alien language, and we do, of course, need to worry about some of the things that we're seeing with the new technology, and it will get better, but we still need to know these historical examples as we sort of think through this. And here's an example that's even older than that. We were seeing this in science even as well. So this is a paper Atomic Energy will have made available to a single source. Looks like a legitimate physics journal, right? Well, I won't make you read through the abstract because it's pretty laborious to read through this abstract. The only thing I will tell you is that it was created with the autocomplete from your iPhone. This is the abstract here. This was created just to make a point that some of these what are called predatory journals were accepting anything. So an author took the autocomplete, which is essentially what these chatbots are today, autocomplete on steroids. It took its autocomplete and basically wrote a paper and got it accepted. And it looked like a real science journal. So this was, again, happening before. So I guess the point here is that right now, yes, we have a lot of these things to worry about. We're seeing these sorts of things. But these are not totally new things. Now, just recently, in the last several weeks, there's been a lot of discussion about the spread of misinformation from Alexa and some of our voice assistance technologies that a lot of us have in our homes. And these are driven by a lot of the same kinds of AI technology. And Amazon has responded and said, this is a concern and we'll look into it. One of the main ones was that it was spreading sort of misinformation around the prior election. And it was citing sources that, really, I think most people would agree that were a little problematic when it was doing that. And so these kinds of technologies will exist everywhere. It's not just playful on platforms like DALL-E. We're going to have to contend with these kinds of things in the technologies that exist everywhere that we use, from our cars, into the doctor's office, to the kinds of things that are sitting in our living room, listening to us all the time. And also, it comes at a time where a lot of the technology companies have not really invested as much as they have in the past. Well, as a researcher, I would say invest way, way, way more, especially during this time as this new technology takes out. But the tech labs around these safety teams has come at a time when we need them more than ever. And I also just want to mention my colleague, Emily Bender. We're writing a perspective right now we're basically in a debate with others about whether this technology is good for science, bad for science. But she has this wonderful paper and concept called the stochastic parrot. And she's a linguist. She's studied her entire career the sort of nuances of language and grammar and all the kinds of things that we need right now. I mean, this is like, she's like been primed her whole life to be the person, and she is. I think she's fantastic. And one of the more important points that she makes is there's a real difference between form and substance or function. So form is a very different thing, and just because we see text that looks plausible does not mean that the system knows anything or is a knowledge machine. And I think, using this, this is a beautiful picture of a parrot because of this idea, the stochastic parrot, and it really does a good job of critiquing. Now you could say, well, okay, let's just go back to our search. At least we're okay in our search engine world, right? Well, I have, basically infinite examples of these. So where do we go? Bing or Google or whatever. So we go here, we go to these search engines, and I'll give you this example I was telling you about the data void. So in class, in real time, this week, we were in class, and one of the students said, it sounds like Vladimir Putin got a heart attack. They, of course, heard it on TikTok. I still am not a huge TikTok fan, but I guess you do get news, breaking news. Did anyone hear about this issue of Vladimir Putin's health? Anyone in here? Not really. It went viral and then just tamped down right away. But so we did. I did a quick search in class, and I said, Vladimir Putin's health. The top thing that comes up is Putin found on the floor after suffering cardiac arrest. This is the top thing found on Google. This is a situation where Google and other news agencies, there's no time for the other agencies to do any vetting, and boom, this news station, this news site, which doesn't have the kind of reputability that you would expect for a huge, huge rumor like that, was the #1 hit on Google. And so we can't always depend on those kinds of things. And even just today, I saw this today. Actually, my colleague sent me this today saying, as a follow-up to this, the New York Post had to do this. Kremlin denies absurd claim. It was this was a rumor that they had to respond to. Even the Kremlin had to respond to this sort of thing because this thing can grow. And then I could give you all the details. We've been doing a little bit of forensics on it, how it grew, which was kind of interesting. But let me just give you another example of the ways in which generative AI is getting in the way of what we're seeing on search engines. So if you were to search this, and I checked it last night, so it still works, and maybe it got corrected today, because if I talk about it enough, then maybe Google and others might fix it, but it's too funny not to fix it, so don't fix it now. This is one of the times I don't mind, but is there a country in Africa that starts with K? You know what its answer is? Top thing you see on Google? While there are 54 recognized countries in Africa, none of them begin with the letter K. The closest is Kenya, which starts with K sound, but is actually spelled with a K sound. It's always interesting to learn new trivia facts like this. That's the first hit on our front door to the internet, Google here. So, and again, Google gets a lot of search rate, of course. It's not an attack on them, and actually it does a pretty good job. We've done audits of searches during different times like elections and stuff, and there's things that obviously it does quite well, but the point is that it's getting flooded with AI-generated content. This actually, if you source it, it was generated with this new technology. And as that new technology generates BS, and then it trains on that new stuff, it feeds on its own garbage. That's a problem. And we're seeing this sort of just in how search engines more generally. There's examples from Bing. There was an engineer that was generating some stuff. It was generating content on the web that got picked up and was getting picked up as some of the top things in Bing as well. So it's happening across the board. Now let me give you one more historic example, and then I'm going to go to my last section of the talk, and then we're going to sew up. Identity, authentication, these kinds of things are going to be more important, as we all know, more than ever. And the thing that scares me about democratic discussions really was ignited. This was back in 2017 when there was all this discussion about net neutrality. Well, at the time, the offices there were getting all of these comments on one side of the issue. It seemed a bit strange. In fact, they had 20 million sort of comments that had come in. Well, to no surprise, most of those that were coming in were from fake accounts. They were fake identities. They weren't real. And that was back in 2017. You can do that even easier. And the reason that scares me is because democratic discourse, or to have really healthy democratic discourse with our elected officials, they can't just depend on online information in sort of getting the true temperature of what's out there in the public. And that was a problem in 2017. It didn't get enough news, by the way, but it will get enough news now. And this is becoming easier and easier to even write even more commentary that's even easier. And even back then, too, when Zuckerberg was pulled in front of Congress, at that time, he had admitted, this was written, that Facebook had disabled 1.3 billion fake accounts. That was then, and that was just shortly after they had talked about bragging to their shareholders about 2.27 billion people on their platform. That seems strange. 1.3 billion fake accounts, 2.27 billion users. Now, we don't know the exact numbers, and there may be all sorts of caveats to these things. The point here is if there was a lot of fake accounts then, it's even worse now. And certainly this issue with some of our social media platforms, I know that X, now formerly Twitter, is having a lot of issues here. And so I'm going to skip this example just because I want to be able to have time for questions. But this is just an example I was going to show you of even things that aren't necessarily the generative AI that can make mistakes. But by thinking about it with this example, you can sort of be able to basically call BS on some of the generative AI examples. So I'm just going to quickly click through this so I can get to the last part. So now we've been a little critical. We've been scared. We've been amazed. But now let's be practical. The genie's out of the bottle. It's here to stay. We know that. What do we do about it? We can do things with policy. We can do things with education. We can talk to each other about these kinds of things. We can develop technology that's better. Hopefully, we can be aware. These are the kinds of things I just want to quickly say. Now, since I'm in the world of education, I have to say, it is causing quite a storm within the education world. As I mentioned, just today we were going back and forth about this big, long statement we're going to make towards it. My philosophy is that it's here, and I allow my students to use it as long as they note that they use it. I don't want to fully remove it because I want to have a chance for the students to talk about what they do well and what they don't do well. And so I allow to use it. Some of my colleagues don't allow to use it. I do a lot of written tests, though, now, so that they can't just do that on a test. It's an interesting time for both the students and faculty in this space. But the most important thing that I think that students miss right now, they're becoming query engineers, not writers. And writing, as we all know, is a way of crystallizing your thoughts. It's the process of writing that's of value, not always the product. And I think that's one of my biggest worries with students. Now, there's been some really inventive things that are done by the students at University of Washington. Here's one example, and this was written up in the Seattle Times. One of the students in our information school, which I was excited to see. Basically, this student had done a FOIA request for the applications at some of these harder programs. One of ours is one of the harder ones to get into, in computer science and others, and got that information, and then using that information, trained a large language model and incorporated basically a way of checking someone's essay as they turned it in to make sure they kind of hit some of these major points in these different programs. Pretty cool, right? And it is really, this kind of work is going to happen, and it's amazing. And this is where we can kind of be practical. However, there are some issues that we should consider too. One, if you have the information, then hopefully the students wouldn't necessarily depend on a chatbot. What if that chatbot gives bad advice? What do we do? What if the information that we have is not the kind of information that would give that the students would be given? That is the stuff that would help them get into these programs. And there are organizations. I'm actually just to be completely forthright about this. I'm an advisor on this project. But this is a project where we're trying to incorporate AI on things that it does actually well, which is like synthesis. So we've developed this thing called consensus.app, which if you want to engage with the literature and ask questions like, are COVID vaccines, helpful for reducing, my chance, extreme, illness or whatever. You can just basically ask a question, and using claim extraction, it can go into the literature, find, and then here's the cool thing, it synthesizes that and then says, here's how many studies that show that wine is good for you, here's how many showed not good for you, and here's how many neutral, just to show you the caveats that exist in the literature. And so this is an area where I think we can use the technology, because there's some things it does well. It's good for non-native English speakers, et cetera. It's good for doing some synthesis to a degree, knowing that they do hallucinations. So there's things. But practically too, as some of you probably don't know, it's expensive resource-wise to run these. And it's only in the hands of the most powerful companies, because you have to have huge, huge coffers and huge data sets to be able to run these things. So only 3 or 4 major companies in the world really, maybe a little more than that, but not very many get access to it. Researchers certainly don't have. I don't have access to all the GPUs I need and all the data. So that's an issue, but then also the cost. If you compare the cost of, let's say, a typical Google query, let's say it's, I don't know, but it's like 5 cents or something. These aren't exact numbers. We'll have to look at the exact, people have done this analysis. Well, the cost of doing a query with some of these chatbots is almost an order of magnitude more. 7 to 10 times more, at least some of the analysis. So it's costly to our environments. In fact, some of the analysis that just came out this week, and I think it was reported in the New York Times, that it won't be long before just running these things could be the energy cost of an entire country, like the size of Argentina. That's how expensive it is. So we should take that into account and maybe think, maybe we could use some bespoke models, customized models for different tasks, which would be far less, and you can do a little bit, actually, they make a little more sense in some ways. And other thing is, like, you got to know your data, know thy data, and there's been all sorts of work looking into where these data sets are coming from. First of all, they're stealing from a lot of the content creators. That's something to be worried about. There's private data in there. There's been Report Scientific American recently came out that's looking at your personal data in there, but also, data that have these embedded biases, all sorts of things that we need to be careful, and we just don't know because those data are so opaque. And it's one of the calls that we have as researchers. We want to have access to these things so we can do some of those kinds of audits. We can't at this point. And the point about bespoke models are basically customized models for the task. So if you want to build a grammar checker, maybe Grammarly is just fine. We don't need a large language model that costs billions and billions. We have some of those kinds of things that do a pretty good job. And we have model and programs that can actually do protein folding way better than I would imagine a large language model. So why invest so much into a model you can't really reverse engineer, that's so opaque and so hard to really understand and really isn't built for that? Why are we going in that direction? So these are things we need to consider on the practical side. And then also it has all sorts of issues even when we use it for things like, I know this is just a recent paper just came out by Hane Farid, who's a real big researcher in this at Berkeley. It's just looking at how these could be used for like performance of basic things like looking at people's height and weight if you were doing forensic stuff. And it turns out the machines don't do very well. They do way worse than non-experts. And so, again, these are things we got to be careful about jumping to what they can do. And of course, there's policy that we can sort of do on the practical side. We've been a part, my colleague Ryan Kalo and I helped write the bill here in the state of Washington that just got passed this year. And it was, there was a press release with Governor Inslee on this. It's one of the first deepfake bills during an election. So there's specific rules around using deepfakes that could interfere with public discussions around elections. And that is not, now that's passing, these others, other states are doing, they have their own, they're not just copying ours, but we're now working with groups in DC to give them some advice, at least on the technology side and on the legal side. So there are some things going on and we're trying to help and participate in those things. There's also been lots of suits recently, like just there's a big announcement with Meta claiming that social media, 41 states have joined in the suit about these addictive harms, and again, at those core are AI as well. And I had mentioned the importance of like credentials and authentication more than ever. And so we've been doing a bunch of work looking at the role of perceived experts, but the role that they play and how that could affect how misinformation spreads. In fact, there's been, and maybe this is going too far, but this is how bad it is in the medical field, that they're talking about having to take people's license away for spreading lies about things that are totally against the consensus within science. Now, this is very controversial, and this is, there needs to be debates on this. I'm not saying we should have jumped to that, but this is how, this is how desperate things have come in some of these different fields. And we've been doing work on looking at different interventions that we could do to slow misinformation in both kinds of worlds. And we have, to do a lot of this work, we have the Center for Informed Public, which is here in our local communities, and it really is meant to serve the public. It's at a public institution with a public mission, so we do a lot of work on research, of course, that's our core mission, but we also do a lot of stuff in policy, as I mentioned, engagement, education. I'm flying through these last ones, I'm almost to the end. And we do have this program, for example, where we bring high school students, thousands across the campuses. We do this in collaboration with Washington State University, and we bring students and spend an entire day talking about misinformation. Things like generative AI, by the way, is going to be one of our big topics with the students, of course, this coming program. We do it once a year, and we make all our material freely available. It goes out to other schools. And we've been also working with communities, rural communities, urban communities, community colleges, librarians, et cetera, working on these things, building trust. We've built games. So my colleague and I built this game called Which Face is Real a long time ago, many years ago, to bring public attention to these GAN-generated images, these deepfakes, as a way of sort of bringing just public attention that the technology is here. So we are trying to do something on the education. We even have an escape room. So if you like escape rooms, you can do an escape room with us to go through these. You can run them with your communities. We can send you the material. You can do it in person. You can do it virtually. Eventually, we wanted it in actual museums. We translate it into other languages. And these are ways to have these conversations so we can all become more resilient in our community. And we have researchers that in our center that do stuff on building ways of becoming better sourcers. And so I'll give you my favorite example from Mike Caulfield. For years, he and others have been talking about the need for Google to create tools for the public that fact checkers and journalists use all the time. And so now you'll see, this is basically brand new thing. On Google, you'll see 3 vertical dots next to every search thing. And if you look at that, it gives you information like a fact checker would look. And it'd say, this website was made at this time, and all sorts of other metadata. Super cool, and it's being the uptake has been really good. Google liked it so much. They now have it with images. This just came out, like, I think this week. So when you see an image, like here's an image of Town Hall, it can say when that image was created, which is so cool to finally, we shouldn't have had to wait till 2023 to get these tools, but we need them more than ever with generative AI. And so this is my last sort of example that there are so many kinds of things that we see during crisis events like major hurricanes, during conflicts like we're unfortunately seeing right now in the Middle East, and we also, during elections, et cetera. But there are some things that always pop up each and every time, and that's things like sharks swimming in the street. This image, I guarantee you, this exact image will show up in the next hurricane. And with this new tool, you can actually check it. I checked it today. I said, oh, what did it say? And it says exactly what it should say. It showed up first time on the web that they gobbled 10 years ago. It's been showing up at many of these hurricanes. It's been called out by Snopes, fact-checking, all these other fact-checking organizations. And you could now see that if that came up on Google and you found that image. So we're getting the tools, but we need to push these technology companies to do that. So here's what I have to say. Be amazed, be a little scared, certainly be critical, and we can be a little practical as well. But looking forward, I would say the most important thing that we can do is do what you're all doing, which is coming and talking about it, because I don't have all the solutions. It keeps me up at night, and we've got a lot of challenges ahead. So thanks so much for taking the time to listen about this, and now we can maybe take some questions and comments. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Jevin. And for anybody who has a question, you can email it in to May I Ask if you're feeling a little shy. And we also welcome you to please come to the microphone so that you can ask your question and we catch it for the live stream. Thank you so much.
Now, who's going to be the first one? Oh, awesome. Look at this. This is good. Sometimes I have to have candy for the students and stuff. Like, oh, they're going to do a little rock, paper, scissors.
Oh, yeah, no, go ahead.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for your talk.
Yes.
In this talk, as well as in your book, it was a pleasure to dive into the particularities of misinformation content on a piece-by-piece basis. I was wondering, in addition to the many tools that we have available to us now, diving into metadata, as well as what you and Professor Bergstrom recommend, stopping and all that stuff, that all seems to be focused on a case-by-case for content basis. Can you talk about some tools that are available to us in understanding misinformation networks, what we can do as individuals and policy on that end?
I'm so glad you asked that because it's the hardest one. Because the one that the thing that you had mentioned where we can do a pretty good job at being resilient consumers of information. I mean, it takes practice. I mean, I teach this and research this every day, and I still need to practice and create these habits of mine. But it's exactly what you're talking about, the disinformation campaigns, the information networks that are much harder. And so for those types of things, a couple things to keep in mind. We're doing research on this right now. What holds a lot of them together are things called like deep stories. These are things like the big lie, or the kinds of things that hold entire groups together, and those are hard to shake. And there's these narratives and these frames in which these rumors can flood in, and you create these frames and you sort of pay attention to these frames because a lot of times they have similarities across different countries and different contexts. And it's what we've noticed is when we've found we've dug into a particular type of frame, we see that frame again and again because those sometimes are being deployed, sometimes organically, but a lot of times strategically. And those frames then encompass that sort of whole campaign. So what do we do in that case? It's difficult. So one of the things I recommend is that, internationally, and we should do this, of course, nationally too, not just internationally, but there needs to be consequence for this kind of behavior. We've just not, it's a hard one to sort of make purchase on because we have all these other really big things internationally we're trying to do diplomacy on. But I think there has to be discussions about that, maybe in the UN, maybe at sort of the international stage. I think journalists and policymakers need to be aware of these sort of larger stories that go beyond just that discretized piece of information. But I'll just say it's hard. It's really hard. And that's why when we study things, we've studied these things for years. When you add up all the researchers in our center, and you add them all up, it's like decades of experience, and we only have really a handful of examples where we've done a good job digging into the really full disinformation campaigns. That should tell you how hard it is. So so I wish I had a better answer, and we're working hard on it, but the fact that you asked it means you're aware of it more than most. So I think that's a positive thing. Thanks.
Cool. All right. So my question is sort of more just simple in that you take a picture like the bomb by the Pentagon, the fake picture.
Yeah.
Like, who creates a picture like that? Who are they? Where are they? Are they down the street? Are they in Eastern Europe? Are they in Nigeria looking for
all of the above? Sometimes it's them. Yeah.
So
Sometimes
I
it's.
wonder what you get.
Yeah. No. I mean, so I think what you're asking is about motivations. And who are the sources, right? So sometimes it is the Macedonian teenagers. The Macedonian teenagers were the famous, teenagers from that country that were really injecting some of the most viral pieces of news during the 2016 election. In fact, the most spread news story on social media and basically everywhere was that the Pope endorsed Trump, which he hadn't at the time, but it spread like wildfire. And it was created by some teenagers just sitting in a little room. And it's in a city that's been pretty run down. And the average income, I think, is about $5,000 a year. They were making about $100,000 as teenagers. So financial motivation, there's one. They didn't care if it was Hillary Clinton who won or Donald Trump. They didn't care about it. There was money to be made. Now, of course, there's propagandists out there that are pushing certain kinds of propaganda, and sometimes those techniques are just simply injecting noise into the system. They're putting out mutually contradictory information. They're, of course, fanning the flames on one side of a social issue, then the same individuals are fanning it on the other side of the issue, and they're just trying to create confusion. And if you then don't trust anything in the system, you retreat into this sort of splinter net that we now live in, it seems, with these different social platforms and sort of these little islands and echo chambers that we live in. That becomes problematic. Now, there are individuals that make their money and make their career and their influence during crisis events. They take advantage of crisis events. Soon as a crisis, they are poised and ready to go. As soon as a crisis event occurs, boom, they sweep in with answers of, doesn't matter what the answers are, people then go to them just because they're looking for answers. Like during the pandemic, people wanted answers. There were people that were there. During the crisis that are going on up, people, they're ready and poised to take advantage. And then once you get that lift in terms of citations, well, that translates into influence, and it translates into money. Now, of course, there are the trolls out there. Think of that smiling troll image that we had up there. There are trolls that just troll for troll's sake. I think they're a smaller number, at least when I've looked at things. And then there's this really other important group that we can't forget, and that's people just truly doing honest sense-making. And we forget about those individuals because we think there's all these bad actors, which there are plenty of them, that are opportunists and propagandists, et cetera. But people that are doing honest sense-making, their sort of good intentions can be hijacked. Sometimes by individuals and organizations, but sometimes by the algorithms themselves, because the algorithms have one objective: keep your eyeballs on the platform, and when that's the case, there can be some negative consequences. So it's across the board, and they're from all over the place, but that particular one, we've done some work, we still don't know. It's hard to figure out on that particular, we do some of that work, and we work with fact checkers, and some of our students and postdocs and myself and others will do some work doing, but that one was a hard one to figure out. It came from, here's what we do know, it did come from a very influential Twitter user at the time. It was, I hadn't switched to X at that point, but it was, I think, after Musk took over. And that influential account was taken down after that, but there was just not a lot of information where it came from. So it's a lot of times, it's really hard. And so there's this data provenance. One thing I didn't mention is that big companies that are generating this kind of technology are putting watermarks. And it's a good step. Of course, it won't solve everything. Watermarks do help, at least. Like all of my images of DALI had this little watermark. Well, that helps, but it's not going to solve it for those 20% that are doing it for other reasons. So thanks. Thanks so much for the question. Sorry for the long answer.
Yeah, I have kind of a turf question.
A turd or
turf?
Turf. Okay.
Turf. I'm kind of interested as a graduate of the School of Communications, I have a journalism
Oh,
degree.
awesome. You would know a lot about this.
Okay, well, I'm kind of wondering why you aren't part of the School of Communications. Your name of the group is Center for Public Information. It would kind of seem the place for it. So
We partner with them, actually. So actually, we have like Katie Pierce, who's a professor in there. We've worked with Maker. So we have, it's a university-wide center, and then we have tentacles everywhere. And
okay, well, that
communication
was
is one.
kind of part B. What work do you do with the school communications? And part C is, don't you folks have like a quarterly newsletter or something where you put some of these findings out?
Yes.
Either through the UW or somewhere other channel.
I'm so glad you asked that, because we work so hard on that news. Actually, Michael Grass might be listening. Hey, Michael, he's our communication director. He works so hard. He writes a beautiful newsletter. So please email us. Go to cip.uw.edu, and you can sign up for the email letter. And we send something every couple months, and we have all these findings. And I'm so proud of our, I mean, this is coming from, we're almost 50 when you put all the students and everything, faculty, postdocs. And so you can see what we're doing. And then we're also reporting on things that are happening in our network. But we're, of course, a really good we truly are one of the international leaders in centers in this. And so it's really important for us to communicate what we're doing. So we send that out. So please sign up. Now, in terms of communication, we have 2 faculty that are part of it, and then students. In fact, I just saw them at our luncheon. We have our regular luncheon every week, and everyone comes. And so we do have a connection, and communication is absolutely important.
Yeah, I mean, I read about it in the alumni newsletter. That's how I found out about you guys.
That's awesome. Okay, so you got to sign up for the newsletter. Anyone else who wants to sign up, just because if you want some reading about all the crazy stuff that we're doing. So thanks for asking.
So, this is not a new problem.
Nope.
Everybody lies. Queen
Yep.
Victoria sent a photographer to the Crimean War, where she dispatched British troops to fight the Turks. And the photographer created fake photographs of like cannonballs strewn across the landscape. But in modern times, there's solutions to these things. Consider parents. Their teenage son and daughter have just gone out on a date. And they come back, and the parent's angry. Where did you go? You're past curfew. Your clothes are all askew. What were you doing?
Uh-oh.
And he says,
I've got kids that are getting into that stage. I'm a little worried even just hearing the story.
and they say, don't worry, Dad. Don't worry, Mom. I can't get pregnant. He uses a condom. And the guy says, don't worry, Mom. I use a condom. And don't worry, nothing's going to happen. Well, of course. So what's the solution to that? You say, like, sit down, eat something, have some food. Now, go get in your pajamas, go to the bed, and I'm going to talk to you in the morning. You introduce, number one, you mediate the information. You introduce delay. And then you speak later about it when everybody's calmer and out of crisis mode.
Yeah, I think I see your comparison, which is, I think we have a high temperature right now in our political environment, and maybe I think what you're saying is, speak to it, delay a little time, wait till people have calmed down, and then we can speak a little more logically. And I think there's some real truth to that, I think. And you had also mentioned, which is a little bit separate from that, but I do want to mention, this is not new. It's been going on forever. In fact, one of my favorite examples within the life sciences was a butterfly that was really famous at the time. It was called the brimstone butterfly, but it wasn't a real butterfly. There was a naturalist at the time had basically taken an ink marker. They didn't have that at the time, but a marker and colored it, sent it to Linnaeus. This is the famous individual that sort of helped build the classification theory for biologists, and it fooled him totally. So there was fake butterflies. We have deep fakes now, and there were fake butterflies then, and so they do exist. It's been going on a long time. In fact, you had mentioned the leaders, like I think there was a couple leaders that did a lot of airbrushing of techniques of photographs all the time. So yes, so there's that. It's not new. It's been around. Yellow journalism and everything has been around forever. And then this issue about we do need to be able to get to a place where we can have discussions. The problem is the online environment doesn't really facilitate that. It sort of foments high emotion. It does exactly the opposite of what you were saying, and that makes it tough to actually have those conversations.
Hi, Dr. West, and thank you so much for coming.
Yes, thank you for coming
your
too.
knowledge with us. I did check your credential. You're real. And,
I was going to actually have someone come up and see if they could tell, but
I'm
pretty soon we're going to
glad-
have to carry an ID that's like, I'm real.
Yes,
Actually, I do have
check
an
your
ID, I
pupil.
guess.
And, yes, I'm very thankful that this is an in-person, communication. I have two questions. One is whether you are a biophysicist, and second, as you are parents of two kids, right? What kind of things how do you communicate with your kids? What's going on out there? And I'm not sure that they have their own phone or not. I have a 14-year-old somewhere. And what would you say to them as a parent with all this knowledge?
So I'm glad you asked it. It's something I'm struggling with and thinking about all the time. I do this professionally, and then you'd think I translate it beautifully at home, but I find that it's extra challenging. It's hard to figure out how to talk with relatives that have very different political views. It's really hard to have conversation. I still have them. I think it's really important to have those conversations. But with my kids, I think the most important thing that my wife and I really have dug in on is that we want to keep as open as we can about anything, just always talking about it. I know that sounds so cliche and sort of general, but talking about these things so that they're aware and they've heard these things before they're heard or seen for the first time. We do talk about how do you know what you know. I don't use the term epistemology because that's just a fancy term academics use, but that's really at the core of what academics have done for centuries is how do we know what we know? Well, let's have that conversation with the kids. How do we know what we know online? Sort of epistemology in the real world. So having questions about how do you know? So if they see something and make a claim, I just pose the question, not in an aggressive way. How do you know that? Oh, so you found that on that website, or your friend found that on the social media or on TikTok or whatever. How do they know? Where did that come from? How could we go about checking where that came from? So it's that question, but also just being inquisitive. I always sort of say it's better to be inquisitive than to be lawyer-like. Even though there's lawyers probably in here too. I mean, I depend. We've depended in our center for lawyers. When you work in the misinformation world, you need lawyers. So in that case, being very open about it. We do talk about specific details too, how to be aware of how some of these algorithms are running A/B experiments and how they're trying to capture your attention, being aware of the ways in which you can be manipulated, being aware of all the sorts of things that we talk about in details, but talking to them like adults. That's the other one last thing I would say is that you could talk to this younger generation. We go talk to middle schoolers, high schoolers. My kids are in elementary school. We talk to them all the time. So I would say these are the kinds of things that we do. And I had my PhD in biology, but it was mostly on the computation information side, thinking about information both in the life sciences and the social sciences. So that's the background. If you looked at me up, that is real too. That's not fake.
One last question.
Yes. And thanks for all these questions, and you're hanging on. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be talking to all of you.
So accountability and ownership are two things that are on my mind because it seems like these institutions that are creating this AI want the ownership of it. They want it to be the black box that they hold. But then when someone generates something that is harmful, they don't want the accountability.
Yep.
And I'm curious what your institution is doing to be at the table with lawyers to make that type of policy. You brought up the deep fakes.
Yep.
I'm curious where that ownership goes to. Is it chicken or the egg? Is it the person who prompts the AI to make those deep fakes?
Right.
Or is it the institution that has allowed that deep fake to be produced?
It's a great question, and you should join our conversations that we're having right now on this very issue. One of the mirroring concepts in the legal world when it comes to internet law, actually the sacred cow law of the internet is Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act. A lot of you heard of Section 230. What's that? It's funny because the whole Communication Decency Act, most of it was like, it's forgotten, doesn't matter. But there's this small little section, Section 230, that essentially granted immunity to platforms like Facebook to not get in trouble for the content being posted on their platform. So this is kind of getting at your point, saying, well, you have this technology. In that case, it was platform technology to allow these conversations, and they wanted, but they didn't want to sort of take accountability for things that they don't, because they don't want to be sued for these kinds of things. But you've now flipped it into this new world that we exist in, which is the AI world, which is we have this technology, they create it, and if that leads to things like affecting an election or affecting someone's health Or, of course, now even there's technology, a lot of this AI, it's not generative AI, but technology that drives our self-driving cars and crashes. Who's at fault? Is the software, is the hardware, is the car, is the driver? Who's at fault? These are the kind of questions that are swirling right now in the sort of discussions at state levels and at the federal level, and we're settling on different things right now. One of the things that we can look to, at least in the policy world, that's making progress in the European Union is the Digital Services Act. And that particular act has been finally making some progress in at least forcing them to table to be a little bit more accountable on different aspects. There's some, when you get into the details, it's different elements. But this question you have is so open right now, and there's, I think, a lot to be contributed because we don't have great answers and we don't have great precedent for it. The only thing, I used Section 230 just because it's a somewhat of an analogy to this, but I think it's a great question and I don't have great answers yet. So you should join the conversation. So anyway, well, thank you so much for the questions and thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jevin, for spending your Friday with us. They're so
thank you for
great to
spending
get
your
to hang out
Friday,
with you.
so,